Hey, so I just practiced my Portuguese for like 2 hours. I used a Porta dos Fundos video, and I want to summarize for you now what exactly did I actually do in those 2 hours, and how did that lead me to get some progress in my accent, my Portuguese in general, and maybe you can model that for yourself and pick out some of your favorite parts of what I did and use that in your own training for English, for an American accent, that kind of thing. So let's dive right in. And I also want to mention in the description below this video, you can see the link to the full 2 hour video that I did, the raw video, the behind the scenes video. And you can actually watch exactly what I did for the full 2 hours if you want to. There's timestamps on that video, so you can skip around to the parts that you want to see. But so let's go ahead and get into this summary video now. So you can see on the right side of my screen, a brief summary, and I'll kind of explain what these are. I'm basically explaining the timestamps in the other video, but that's fine. So the first, I don't know, 45 minutes, hour or something was I wrote my own subtitles to this video. So it's a 2-minute video basically from Porta dos Fundos, and I spent like 45 minutes or an hour or something writing my own subtitles without looking at the actual subtitles for the video. So in other words, life doesn't come with subtitles. So something that I believe is a useful exercise is to listen and challenge yourself to actually write every single word that they said. Because sometimes when you're just passively listening, you think you understand more than you really do. But when you sit down to actually try to write every single word and write your own subtitles, you're forcing your brain to notice if there's something that you're not understanding. So there's a quote that I like that is, babies are not better language learners than you. They just don't have escape routes. So this is one method to get rid of your escape routes, because normally you just, you don't understand a word here or there and you just ignore it and you move on, and your brain lies to yourself and you feel good. You think you understood everything, but really there's stuff that you aren't understanding. So when you do this exercise, you're getting rid of the escape routes, you're writing your own subtitles, and you're forcing your brain to acknowledge every single word to see if you understood it or not. So you're going to notice new words that aren't as familiar to you. You're going to notice reductions and things, interesting ways of pronouncing things that you're not used to, where you don't even understand what they're saying and you have to listen to it multiple times and you still don't understand. So it's a really good exercise to train your ear and to be honest with yourself about how much you're really understanding. So I did that. It took me like 45 minutes or an hour or something for this 2-minute video, and then I checked my subtitles versus the official subtitles for the video. So I finally, after 45 minutes or whatever, when I wrote my full subtitles, now I turned on the official subtitles for the video in Portuguese, and I went through the video again and I reviewed that and I checked to see if my subtitles were the same as the official subtitles. And sometimes I disagree with the official subtitles. Sometimes I think that my subtitles were actually more accurate to what the person said. So that's something to be aware of, is that the official subtitles sometimes will not be correct, or they will represent a sort of more formal version where they leave out a couple of extra words, or, so I think turning on the subtitles is a very good way to check if you were right, but you don't want to pretend that the official subtitles are always going to be perfect. They can still have issues as well. So keep that in mind. So that's what I did. And mixed in with that, while I was doing this review process, that's when I started doing some accent practice as well. Once I was more confident in the words that they were actually saying and the way that they sounded, the actual way that they were delivered, that's when I started, and really I kind of mix in and focus on accent the entire time. But somewhere in here, deeper into this, is when I started kind of turning on the accent dial, turning that up even higher. So increasing the amount of focus that I was putting onto the accent. And in particular, there was one phrase that when I was first writing out the subtitles, I didn't know what it was. Maybe I can even show you that here. Yeah, so you can see this phrase. Let's listen to how he actually says it. But you can see I put like this little, whatever you call it, a little placeholder, because I didn't know what he was actually saying. Let me pull up the video and you can actually hear that phrase.
Olha quem chegou aí. Eu posso saber onde é que a senhora estava? Olha quem chegou aí. Eu posso saber onde é que a senhora estava?
So I didn't know what he was saying. I listened to it slow. I still didn't know. And so I just put a blank there and moved on. And then when I came back for the review phase and turned on the official subtitles, that's when I realized what he actually said. And it was like, oh, a light bulb moment, an epiphany. I was like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I agree with the official subtitles. It makes sense now. I still need to listen to it a little bit to figure out exactly what it was and if I agreed 100% with it. And then I spent some time practicing the actual, like the accent, the specific exact way that he said it, because there's some interesting reductions, the way that he combined words in ways that I was not familiar with, that I was not expecting. So Yeah, it's this phrase here. Eu posso saber onde é que a senhora estava. But he connects these words more, like posso saber. He says more like posso saber. And onde é, that gets connected too. In some way, it's like posso saber onde é. And then que a becomes like ka, I think. And then senhora estava becomes like senhora estava, something like that. Posso saber onde é que a senhora estava? I'm not doing it perfect. I was doing it better when I was imitating it, and you can go check the video and see that if you want. But that was kind of the process. Let me try to keep staying in summary mode. I get tempted to go into the details. So back to kind of summarizing here. That was kind of the first core chunk of my session, right? It was like a 2-hour, 16-minute session. So the first, I don't know, hour, how long was that? You can check the timestamps here. Yeah, up until, here, let me just, so up until about 1 hour and 21 minutes was mainly with the Porta dos Fundos video, writing the subtitles, checking it, doing some imitation, reflecting and rewatching, turning the subtitles off again, I think. I don't remember, but like closing my eyes and listening to the video again once I'd gone through this whole process to see how much better do I understand the video now that I've gone through this whole process of checking each word, checking it against the subtitles, and then, yeah, going back to the full video again, listening to it fresh, with the subtitles off. Maybe fresh is the right word, but seeing what do I understand now? Do I understand it better? Is it easier to understand than the first time I ever heard the video? And of course it is. So I increased my familiarity with these phrases and the accent involved in them significantly by going through this process. And then the last, from 1 hour 21 through the end of the video, through the end of my training session, I started mixing in some other stuff. So kind of like this branching network of, just following my curiosity, basically. So one word that I would hear would lead me to look up something else. So let me pull up. I started making, one of the things was the word bacalhau. I didn't understand that in the video. So that led me to start searching on Youglish to see other examples of that pronunciation and practicing the LH pronunciation and looking up what is it and comparing it, like I've heard of bacalhau in Puerto Rico, and comparing it to that. And I think it's probably similar. Like it's all, I think, related to the same fish. And so just, yeah, kind of interesting comparison between languages and cultures and looking at the history of the word and all that good stuff. Then, yeah, I started making a list of words and phrases to practice, because that's something I believe that is sometimes important, is all this work I did, I'm like planting seeds in a way, but then how do I actually grow those plants and kind of harvest them? How do I get more return on my investment? So all that depth that I did in that hour and 20 minutes of this video, it's planting amazing seeds, deepening my familiarity, where I'm going to notice all the things in that video throughout in Portuguese and other content, the next hour, the next day, the next week, the next month, and maybe longer. These things are kind of being primed in my attention for me to notice them more easily in other content. Now, though, something I'd like to do to kind of compress the timeline and help bring these things into my own speech, so that it's not just stuff that I recognize in other content, but stuff that I can actually use in my own productions. By productions, I mean my own speaking and my own output, is to maybe make a list. You could just do the list in your head, but sometimes it's good to write it out to help you. And then take some of the key phrases and vocabulary that you're learning, and you can combine the accent with that. Try to get the accent and the pronunciation right as you do it. But then start putting these in improvised sentences that you're just making up on your own, and go to Youglish and look up, naturally generated, the way that natives actually use those phrases in real phrases. And then you can go copy those phrases, copy the accent, copy the usage, look at the nuance of the meaning. So like jogar pro alto, that was a new, I think that's a new phrase for me. I kind of understood it based on the context. I could kind of guess what it meant. But then I went to Youglish, looked up, the 8 videos that they had, listened to all of them, and said a couple times, I think, just a couple quick improvised phrases on my own. I don't remember how much of that I did. I should do more of that. But I could do it now, like, lá há alguns anos estava trabalhando como engenheiro, mas aí eu resolvi jogar tudo isso pro alto e trocar de carreira. E começar a fazer isso que eu tô fazendo aqui, agora. E ajudar outras pessoas com sotaque, com idiomas e tudo isso. Então, esse foi um exemplo de usar a palavra, a frase nova, jogar pro alto. E eu posso ficar aqui fazendo mais com outros exemplos. And there can be fake examples just to practice, like, eu ia ser médico, that's not real. Eu ia ser médico, mas eu joguei pro alto. Joguei essa carreira pro alto. I keep thinking of it in the context of a career, which is something I'm noticing, and it probably doesn't have to be that. So I could expand my usage and I could go back to Youglish and see what are other ways that people use this wherein it's not just a reference to switching careers or something like that. Because I think my usage right now is kind of limited to that context. So that's something I'm noticing. And then I could go to Google and Youglish and find, okay, what are other examples where native speakers use this phrase in other contexts? And same thing with, bitolado, bitola, like especially bitolado. I started getting examples of where native speakers use that word and what it means. And I don't know. It's interesting. It's good that I'm doing this review. I'm getting a little bit more into the weeds than I intended, but that's okay because in this review, I'm actually helping myself train a little bit more too and reflect on what I really did and didn't do. Because my advice to you is to make a list like this and practice. This isn't just accent advice, this is like overall language and communication advice as well, but the accent gets mixed in. But yeah, make a list of things that you want to start using and recognizing more, and then actually use them. So that's the way to compress the timeline to accelerate results, is take these phrases and immediately put them in a ton of different improvised phrases, and also go check a bunch of naturally occurring phrases where native speakers have used it. So like, I need to do this more. I need to live my advice. I need to do what I say. So for instance, for bitolado, I did look up a lot of examples of natives using it, but the part that I think am deficient on or should be doing more of is actually using it in my own improvised phrases. So let me try to do a little bit of that now. So bitolado, like, às vezes eu sou bitolado em sotaques. Não sei se estou usando certinho, mas something like that. And then if I want to check, I could compare that to, like, I'm not sure if it should be bitolado em or bitolado sobre, or like, I don't know. I'm not sure like the right way to use it. So that's something I could check. Bitolado em.
30,
okay.
porque eu não fico.
Isso. Ficar bitolado
É o
em
seguinte.
alguma coisa.
30, porque eu não fico também bitolado em manter.
Bitolado. And I could emphasize the a more, potentially, depending on the accent or whatever. Maybe that's something I'm missing. Bitolado. Ficar bitolado em sotaque. And I realized too, it can have kind of a negative connotation sometimes of being like too crazy about something. Maybe I can be that way. I don't know. But even if that's not true, I can practice it this way. Let's see. So it's tricky because you want to get the usage right. So I'm trying to bring in the connotation, the nuance of bitolado potentially being like even to a negative extent, like to a negative, like too much, a little too crazy, a little too obsessed. So I'm not sure if I want to use that to refer to myself with my relationship with accent, because I like to think that, yes, I'm obsessed, but I don't know if it's bitolado, because I view it as a useful thing for me, not as a negative thing. Maybe other people could see it that way, but I don't see it that way personally. So that's interesting. But what I would try to do, and you can notice I'm struggling with it a lot, so this is a sign for both of us, for you and me, that I'm not currently very good at actually using this word. So this is where immediately my reflex sort of is that I realize I need to use this more. I need to get more examples of it being used, figure out the nuance, and use it more myself. So I'm deciding how much I actually want to do that right now, because this live was supposed to be a summary, but maybe I'll go ahead and do it a little bit. Let me do it this way. I'll try to kind of finish the summary, and then maybe I'll come back and do a little bit of practice of this word bitolado, just so you can see how I actually practice it. But we're pretty much at the end of the summary anyway. We're almost there. So yeah, I did this with a couple words. Mainly I was focusing on recognizing it, hearing examples of native speakers using the different words. Like, here's the list. I looked up some of these, heard some of these, not all of them, but like de, he, awe, a couple of these. I could look up more of them. And then, yeah, the part that I want to do even more of, I mean, I also want to hear more examples for these potentially, but I also, for the ones that I think are more interesting, like maybe bitolado, I want to use it more, or maybe de, I want to use that more. That's the part that I'm missing. So I'll maybe circle back and, like I said, do that with bitolado here in a sec. But yeah, make a list. And then não é possível. That at the end, let me show you the timestamps, by the way. This is kind of a wandering summary. Like I said, I'll get better at this the more I do it. But yeah, so we covered this, wrote my own subtitles, checked the official subtitles and imitated a bit, reflected and rewatched. Then I moved on to kind of wandering through other stuff based on my curiosity. So bacalhau, made a list, and that list included jogar por alto, que falar depois de arrotar, aué, alvoroço, ó, DR, bitolado, malu. Then I went back to the video. Oh yeah, I went back to the video and did a little bit of accent practice. Let's see what that was. Tá rolando hoje no dia a dia. Ué, lugar nenhum.
Lugar nenhum, não.
Yeah, just kind of doing like lighter shadowing, I think, if I remember right. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I think I went back to the video and just did kind of light shadowing, imitating out loud without going super deep, but just repeating a lot of the stuff that they were saying. Just circle back to the video and make those connections. And then while I was doing that, when I got to the part where this actress says, não é possível, I noticed, oh, I'm not confident in that pronunciation. And that's when that curiosity led me to go deeper and wider, to get more sources of different people saying não é possível. And I did a little deep dive on that phrase specifically. And I opened up Youglish. I got more examples. I noticed it's interesting how Brazilians can reduce that phrase. It's not always
Sim, fala a verdade.
it's not always não é. It can be like não é or even né. And then possível, I'm probably not saying it perfect, but the pos in the first syllable can become pus, and it can also just be possível. So sometimes it's like não é possível. Não é possível. Like it can be heavily reduced. It can be não é possível. It can be não é, let me see if I can do it. Não é possível. Não é possível. It could also be não é possível. I don't know if I'm doing a perfect job of reproducing that, but that was basically what I observed and what I'm going to keep paying attention to when I listen to Brazilians and what I'm going to keep practicing. So I guess kind of a summary of the summary, or a summary of part of the summary, is something I'm noticing that I do, because I'm learning about what I do at the same time as you are, because a lot of the stuff I do kind of subconsciously, and I just kind of do it. I don't always know how to explain it or teach it or communicate about it. So one of the things I'm noticing about what I did here is I identify something that is interesting to me, a chunk, a phrase, a word, whatever, something that's interesting. And then the way that I explore that, or one way that I explore it, is kind of divided into two things. One is I go get input. I go, for instance, to Youglish, and I put that word or phrase into Youglish, and I go get more examples of native speakers using that word or phrase, because I don't want to just invent stuff out of nowhere for myself and reinvent the wheel or say things that native speakers don't say. I want to be aligned with the actual native usage. So that's kind of the main focus for me most of the time initially, is go get more examples, go get more input, hear how native speakers actually use that thing for real, whatever the thing is. So I do that. I listen to a bunch of videos. I imitate the accent at the same time as I'm doing that, sometimes lighter, sometimes deeper, depending on what I feel like. And I play with often not just that one word, but I notice the context it's in. So the full phrases that the natives are saying, including that chunk that I'm interested in. And I might even imitate the full phrase. Sometimes I even get distracted and notice another word or another sound and go on a deep dive down that. But the basic point is I'm getting more input for that main chunk and listening to a bunch of videos, different native speakers saying that same thing in different contexts. So more input, diverse input focused on one specific chunk of interest. And then the second part is the output, right? Bringing that thing, that chunk of interest into my own output, my own habits of production, of speaking. And that's the part that I think I was a little bit deficient on in this 2-hour session today, but that's okay because I think the input is extremely valuable, maybe even more valuable than the output. Not necessarily, they're both important. But yeah, that's something that I would like to do more of, that I would, if I was continuing practicing, and actually I'm gonna, like I said, do a little bit more as part of this summary, just with the word bitolado, just to show a quick demonstration of that. But yeah, that's something that if I was extending the session from today, which I kind of am now, beyond the 2 hours and 16 minutes I initially did, that would be a key area that stands out to me that would be interesting to do more of, is get, the required minimum viable input awareness that I want to have for how the phrase is used, and then immediately do more of the output where I'm actually practicing putting that chunk into my own improvised phrases. And then if I'm running into uncertainty around, hey, am I using that right? Maybe I can, go back to Youglish or Google and try to check the way that I used it and see if natives also use it the way that I just used it. I don't know if that made sense, but let me try to show you a real example here with bitolado. So bitolado. So I'm going to go to Youglish, and this example, was it bitolado that I was going to do? I also mentioned jogar pro alto. Let's do bitolado. I think that's the one I said I was going to do. Both are going to be valuable, of course. But yeah.
Manter sempre 30, porque eu não fico também bitolado em manter sempre aquilo.
So he's talking about aquilo. So I want to see, what is he talking about? Because my uncertainty, I think I can actually communicate it. My uncertainty around the usage of bitolado is, for instance, if I was going to describe my relationship with accent training as I'm bitolado in relationship to that, my concern is that that brings maybe a negative connotation that I don't want to associate with that, because I view my relationship with accent training as something that's great. So I want to see, in this case, the aquilo here, the bitolado in relationship to something, the aquilo. I want to go see what is that something in this guy's example, in Bruno Perini's example. What is he talking about that he doesn't get bitolado in respect to? I'm saying that in a weird way, whatever. So I'm going to go backwards here on Youglish and see what he's talking about.
Como é que tá ali renda variável? Quantos por cento da sua carteira você coloca em renda variável?
Por coincidência, hoje eu acabei comprando mais ações, aproveitando que o mercado está em baixa.
Sim.
Então hoje acabou ultrapassando um pouco um patamar que eu gosto de deixar ali 70% renda fixa, 30% renda variável. Então, como eu comprei um pouco mais de renda variável, hoje está um pouquinho mais de 30%, porque eu não fico também bitolado em manter sempre aquilo.
Eu vou te falar que eu nem...
So the way I got it, I mean, they're talking about specifics of like trading or investing or whatever. But it seemed to me it was the idea of like, there's a kind of minimum viable approach. And beyond that, just stay relaxed, like tranquilo, like you don't have to be like crazy obsessed about that thing. Like, and it's the idea of like the obsession being too much or unnecessary. That's what I'm taking from this, potentially, at least tentatively. That's my tentative conclusion or assertion, whatever. So bitolado for accent would be like, if I could think of an example, maybe specifically in the domain of accents where not my relationship to accents as a whole, but like a specific training process with accents. Maybe there's something where, if you do this, you get pretty much all the results with this part of your activity. And then if you do more activity beyond that, it's like junk volume. It's like wasted effort. And then that would be where like, you don't need to do that extra stuff. That's like being bitolado. It's like not really worth it. You're not going to get a return on your investment. It's, in accent training, a metaphorical return on your investment, right? Not a financial return in this case, but an accent-based return. But that would be where it's, I guess, bitolado. It's like going beyond. So I wonder if I could think of an example where that would be relevant. I don't know. It's funny because I often think that, like, if you're interested enough in accent, like, my approach is going crazy deep, like, really deep. So I don't actually know where it's bad to go too deep because I just go really deep on everything, basically. So that's part of why I'm struggling to do this with accent. So maybe I'll take another area where I can find something where I have a relationship with something like that, where I'm like, you don't need to go that crazy into it. For instance, business. This is a mistake I made in my own business journey, which was learning too much in theory. Oh, I could relate this to accent too. Yeah, good. Okay. So, but for business first, bitolado, I could apply that to someone who is just like daydreaming a lot, reading all the books, doing all the courses, learning all the information, and not actually taking action, not actually executing, not actually trying to sell something, not actually trying to help someone else. Like at the end of the day, you can make a fancy website and business cards and have a LLC or a formal business entity and all this fancy stuff, invest tons of time and do all the courses, know all the theory, and still not even have a customer. Like never have been actually paid money to help someone and then help them. So you still basically don't have a business in reality. You have a business on paper, but you haven't actually done something real. So that could be an example of, I don't know if I'm using bitolado correctly. I'm exploring this. But maybe that would be an example of how someone could be like bitolado em qualquer, seja com negócios, seja com treinar sotaque, qualquer coisa onde a pessoa fica bitolado em viciado, bitolado em estudar a teoria demais e não foca o suficiente em colocar tudo, colocar a mão na massa, em colocar tudo em prática. E acaba perdendo um monte de tempo, na verdade, porque acaba, how do I say that? Over-investing. Não sei como dizer isso em português, mas acaba over-investing, investindo demais em teoria, no lado intelectual da coisa, sem também equilibrar isso com muito investimento no lado prático. So sometimes I give the example of like riding a bike, where you could read all the theory about bikes, know all the names of the pieces of bikes and the history of bikes, production of bikes, watch tons of YouTube videos about people who are good at riding bikes and do tricks, but you still don't know how to actually ride a bike. That would be an example of over-investing in the intellectual side of things, studying it from the sidelines without actually doing the thing. So maybe, I still don't know if this is the best way of describing bitolado, but it's my initial exploration live, trying to figure this out with an audience, and it's easier if there's no audience, but that's fine. Talvez isso seja exemplo de ficar bitolado em algo. Bitolado em... But also it could be a thing where the person who is bitolado doesn't think they're bitolado. Maybe that's the interesting part, because maybe that's like, if you're looking from the outside, it's a judgment that someone else applies. Like it could be someone's passion, something they love, something they're obsessed with. Or someone that comes to mind would be Kobe Bryant. Was crazy obsessed with training basketball. And I think to him, that was an appropriate amount of obsession. It was good. Like in his opinion, that was a good amount. And then to people from the outside, they might think he's crazy. And maybe that he's bitolado. But I don't think, if he was speaking in Portuguese, I don't think that he would use that word bitolado to describe himself, most likely. I don't know. This is just me thinking, and you guys can let me know. Obviously, it's tricky because I'm live in multiple places. I don't know. If anyone... Anyways. This is something I'm exploring. What does bitolado really mean? And if I go get more examples, I think I'll start to figure it out. That would be probably the best way.
Deu trilho, né? Muita gente fala, pô, cara, isso é bitolado demais.
Demais.
Áreas aí para você não ficar bitolado apenas aprendendo uma questão técnica da sua área. A segunda...
So I think that was similar to what I was saying.
Áreas aí desejo, pô, são praticamente obras de arte, lindas, objetos...
Yeah, bitolado. Over-investing. Maybe that's like a key concept, a key like cue I can have mentally for bitolado. Not that it needs to be tied to English, but like in terms of the concept underneath it. And I'm just happening to say the word in English, but the concept of over-investing in whatever language, beyond language, this concept of overextending, over-investing beyond where maybe it's not the most effective use of your resources, or someone else believes that that's the case. Maybe that's where bitolado gets used sometimes. It's like over-obsessed, over-invested. All right, I'm tired. That's basically the summary. I probably could do a better job of summarizing it actually quickly. Let me see if I can do that just for my own practice, because obviously, I don't know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, let me sort of imagine that I'm redoing this live, and how could I summarize this faster? So, too long didn't read, summary. I'll see if I can get closer to that. So I took a Porta dos Fundos video. I wrote my own subtitles for the video without looking at the real subtitles. Then I checked my subtitles versus the official subtitles, noticed any differences, and then I reviewed the video multiple times, practiced accent along the way, sometimes going deep into some specific phrases and looking at reductions and the exact things that they said or did not say in terms of accent and the specific sounds. And then from there, I expanded to kind of just follow my curiosity wherever it went. And I kind of made a list of words that I was interested in, some from the original Porta dos Fundos video and others not from the original Porta dos Fundos video, because as I would start researching one word that I'd added to my list, I'd look that word up on Youglish or Google, and I'd discover other interesting words and concepts along the way. And then those other words and phrases would get added to my list as well. And while I'm doing this exploration, I'm also focusing on accent sometimes along the way, sometimes more lightly, sometimes more deeply. And then there's also this kind of balance between input and output, where I'm getting a diverse range of input, hearing different ways that native speakers actually use the word or phrase in question. And then I'm also, to some extent, training my own output, trying to improvise phrases using those words and phrases or chunks of interest that are on my list. So I'm trying to actually put them into phrases that are, my own improvised phrases, and then trying to be careful and rigorous with that to check my output to see if it still aligns with how native speakers would actually speak. There, that was a better summary. Of course, it's missing detail, which sometimes bothers me. I'm still learning how to do an effective summary, but that was better. So ideally, that would have been at the beginning of the live, potentially. Anyways, that's fine. All right, the more I do this, the better I'll get. If you want me to help you with actually training your accent, getting an American accent, then you can take advantage of the things that I'm learning from doing these deep work sessions on my own personal accent training, as well as all of the hundreds of Brazilian clients I've helped to get closer to an American accent and all the things I'm learning. You can take advantage of that. So you don't have to spend all the time that I'm spending. It still takes time, it takes work, but if you'd like me to mentor you on this journey and help guide you, show you what I think are the most relevant things for you to work on, then there should be a link below this video. You can also just go to accentmentorship.com. You can type that in your browser, and then you'll see some more information about working with me, and you can apply for me to help you personally. So yeah. If you're Brazilian and you want an American accent, go to accentmentorship.com or click the link below this video. It takes you to the same place, and we'll see if I can help you. All right. I think that's it for now. Have a good night.